Welcome back to Starz Recapped, where we break down your favorite survival and thriller movies in cinematic detail. Today we're diving into the intense 2024 film, Survive. Stranded in a frozen wilderness after a plane crash, a young woman and her fellow survivor must battle brutal cold, dwindling food, and their own fears to stay alive. But as the days stretch on and the hope of rescue fades, survival becomes more than just fighting the elements. It becomes a fight against their own minds. So grab your gear, because this is one cold, emotional, and gripping journey of human endurance. Let's begin the story of Survive 2014, where every breath could be your last. It's a perfect day out on the Caribbean Sea, a family enjoying the calm waves aboard their private yacht. Laughter, sunshine, and the feeling of peace surround them. Among them is Julia, the mother, who decides to take a refreshing dip in the crystal clear water. As she floats peacefully, she suddenly feels something unusual beneath her, a strange tug, a flicker of movement. She looks around, but there's nothing there. Maybe it's just her imagination. But the unease doesn't fade. Moments later, the same chilling sensation returns, stronger this time. Panicked, Julia begins swimming back toward the yacht, calling out for help. Suddenly, something grabs her leg and pulls her under. Her scream echoes across the water, but no one hears. Her daughter Cassie is lost in her music, headphones blocking out the chaos, while Tom and Ben are focused on fishing. Seconds feel like hours as Julia fights to stay above the surface. Then, Tom finally notices she's missing. He races to the edge, spots her struggling, and without a second thought, dives into the ocean. He reaches her just in time, keeping her head above water and dragging her back to safety. The family pulls her aboard, shaken, drenched, and gasping for air. She insists it was just a strong current, but the fear in her eyes says otherwise. That night, things seem normal again as they celebrate Ben's birthday with cake and laughter. But the peace doesn't last long. Cassie steps out to take a video call from her boyfriend. And as he turns his camera toward the city, dark thunderclouds start to form overhead before the call abruptly cuts off. Cassie runs back inside, breathless and worried, telling her family that her video call suddenly froze right when dark clouds appeared. Tom brushes it off, saying it's probably just bad reception this far from land. Before anyone can respond, an unusual sound echoes across the waves. They step outside and spot a pod of whales gliding past the yacht. Tom, amazed, explains that whales usually follow the Earth's magnetic field to navigate, but when storms interfere, the animals can lose their sense of direction and end up swimming toward the coast. Suddenly, the yacht jolts violently, knocking Ben to the floor. The entire boat rattles as if something huge brushed against it. Alarmed, Tom suspects there might be damage below the surface. He grabs his gear and dives into the water to investigate. Moments later, he emerges, bleeding from a deep cut on his shoulder. Julia quickly tends to his wound as he explains that something massive was moving behind him. And just as he turned, he got slashed by the spinning propeller. Whatever it was, he couldn't see it clearly, but it wasn't small. Tom reports that the hull took some serious damage. They need to call for help. Fast. Julia keeps trying to reach someone through the radio, while Cassie desperately searches for a phone signal. But there's nothing. Suddenly, Cassie screams, only to find out it's Ben fooling around with a creepy mask. The tension rises as the yacht's engine suddenly gives out, leaving them drifting in the open sea. After several minutes of silence, Julia finally picks up a faint voice on the radio, but it's just static and broken words. Tom reassures everyone that they still have enough food and water to last about 4 days. All they can do now is wait and hope for a passing vessel. But just when calm starts to settle in, the radar lights up. Something large is moving nearby. A strange, low-pitched hum fills the air. The family rushes outside, only to witness bright streaks of light tearing through the night sky, as fiery meteorites crash into the ocean and distant land, shaking the earth beneath them. Out of nowhere, a blazing object from the sky crashes into the ocean just a few miles from their yacht. The water erupts like an explosion, sending waves in every direction. Acting fast, Tom rushes to restart the yacht's engine, trying desperately to get them away from the impact zone. But before the engine can gain power, another fiery mass streaks down and slams into the sea nearby. The entire vessel trembles as the family clings to each other in panic. Then Tom notices something strange. These aren't meteorites at all. They're pieces of metal, burning as they fall. Satellites. Suddenly, smoke begins rising from the yacht's engine room. Tom checks and realizes the worst. The engine is completely destroyed. As strong winds begin to howl across the deck, the family rushes inside for safety, unaware that their compass has started spinning uncontrollably. Moments later, the yacht lurches violently again. Ben loses his balance and falls hard, injuring his arm. Outside, the sea becomes a nightmare. Giant waves crash against the hull while the wind howls like a storm. Fighting against it, Tom forces the hatch open and drags out a box of life jackets, tossing them to the family one by one. Just then, the power flickers, and everything goes dark. Tom quickly moves to reset the power switch, and the lights blink back to life. But something's wrong. Ben notices blood dripping from Julia's nose, and she starts feeling dizzy, struggling to stay conscious. Cassie suddenly runs to the sink, feeling sick as the pressure in the air grows heavier. Tom keeps calling for help on the radio, but there's only silence. Then, out of nowhere, a sharp, piercing noise fills the air, followed by an intense gust that rattles the doors. Julia tries to hold them shut as the storm outside grows more violent, and something unknown draws closer through the wind. Despite their efforts to seal the cabin, one of the hatches bursts open, letting the violent wind tear through the yacht. Windows shatter as Tom quickly grabs a flare, lighting it just before total darkness engulfs them. When morning comes, the family slowly opens their eyes, stunned that they're still alive. The storm has passed, but the yacht is a wreck. Twisted metal, shattered glass, and silence all around. They step outside, only to witness the unthinkable. The ocean is gone. The endless blue that once surrounded them has turned into a vast, dry wasteland. Their yacht now sits stranded on cracked earth, miles away from any sign of water. In disbelief, they try to make sense of what's happened. Cassie desperately checks her phone for a signal. Nothing. Ben quietly pokes at two lifeless crabs lying in the sand. Tom examines the compass and freezes. The needle is spinning backward. The planet's magnetic poles have flipped, something that hasn't happened in over 700,000 years. Overwhelmed, Cassie breaks down, realizing her boyfriend and everyone else back home might be gone. She locks herself away, refusing comfort, while her mother, Julia, struggles to stay strong. Tom and Julia take stock of whatever supplies survived the chaos. A few cans, some water, barely enough for days. Meanwhile, Ben ties his leftover birthday balloons to a rock, hoping anyone, might see them. Later, Tom tries the radio once more. This time, a faint voice answers. It's a man who introduces himself as Now, the captain of a submarine that's also stranded on dry land. He confirms the terrifying truth. The magnetic reversal has drained the oceans, pulling water away from coastlines and flooding entire continents elsewhere. Now hasn't found any other survivors. Most communication systems are dead, but he's noticed tremors, signs that the poles might shift back soon, which would bring the oceans roaring back in about a week. He warns Tom to move his family to higher ground before that happens, because when the seas return, it will be catastrophic. Before the signal fades, Now adds one last detail. His submarine can only take 3 people. After speaking with the submarine captain, Julia and Tom plead for him to save their children. Moved by their desperation, the captain agrees and shares his location. Tom estimates the journey will take around 2 to 3 days if they travel non-stop. He tells everyone to rest well that night. Tomorrow, their fight for survival continues. As dawn breaks, the family packs what's left of their food and water. Just as they're about to leave, Tom notices movement in the distance. A lone figure staggering toward them, with a limping gait and a barking dog beside him. The man carries a makeshift harpoon and looks exhausted. Trying to show kindness, Tom approaches and hands him a bottle of water. The stranger gulps it down, but doesn't seem to understand a word Tom says. Then, without warning, he smashes the bottle over Tom's head and lashes out, kicking him to the ground. Hearing the commotion, Julia rushes out, but she's too late. The stranger drives the harpoon into Tom's stomach. Tom gasps for air, his body twitching before the attacker delivers a final brutal blow. Julia screams and runs, clutching her bleeding shoulder as the man hurls the harpoon again, narrowly missing her. She races back to the yacht, frantically locking the doors and telling her children to hide. Cassie and Ben crawl into the space beneath the couch, while Julia hands them a flare gun for protection. Then, gripping a knife, she hides inside the bathroom, trying to stay silent as footsteps echo through the cabin. The stranger smashes his way inside, tearing through drawers and cabinets, grabbing supplies as he searches every room. When he heads toward the bathroom, Julia slips out through a broken panel in the wall and crawls outside. She hides behind the wreckage, but the man's dog spots her and starts barking furiously. Before she can react, the animal leaps at her, knocking her to the ground. Cornered and bleeding, Julia fights back with the knife, silencing the dog in one final motion. The stranger rushes out when he hears the noise and freezes when he finds his companion lifeless, falling to his knees in grief. While he's distracted, Julia quietly climbs back aboard through a shattered window. He storms inside and punches her hard, knocking her down. As he drags her across the floor, Julia fights back, but the man catches sight of her at the last moment. He throws everything she has, kicking, clawing, and finally pushing him off with a burst of strength. Julia struggles to fight back, gripping the knife tightly, but the attacker stomps down on her wrist, forcing her to drop it. He grabs her by the hair and slams her face into the floor. leaving her dazed. With a brutal shove, he throws her onto the couch and wraps his hands around her neck, trying to choke the life out of her. Hidden nearby, Cassie and Ben watch in horror, unable to move, until Cassie finally snaps. Trembling but determined, she jumps out of hiding and fires the flare gun. The blazing shot hits the man directly, setting his clothes on fire. He screams in agony as flames spread quickly across the yacht. The kids rush outside, gasping for air, but Julia refuses to leave without their supplies. She runs back in through the smoke, kicks the burning man in the face, and snatches up the map with the submarine coordinates along with their bags. Once outside, Ben and Cassie collapse beside their father's body. Julia joins them, and for a moment they cry together. A final farewell in the middle of the ruins. But there's no time to grieve. A terrifying sound interrupts them. The attacker, still alive, stumbling out of the burning yacht. Julia shouts for the kids to run. As they sprint across the barren land, the yacht erupts behind them in a fiery explosion, lighting up the sky. Hours later, they find a small waterfall and stop to rest. Cassie, still shaken, wonders aloud if the stranger found them because of the balloons Ben released earlier. Ben lowers his head in guilt, but Julia comforts him, assuring him it's not his fault. She tells them they have to keep moving. The man could still be out there. They continue their journey and come across a small pond. Ben, amazed, spots the body of a giant hammerhead shark stranded in the dirt, a haunting reminder of the vanished sea. Suddenly, Julia looks up and freezes. The crazed man is back, closing in on them once again. Without hesitation, the family takes off, running through the wasteland. They slide down a steep dune and find themselves surrounded by barrels of leaking toxic waste, forcing them to move carefully around the deadly terrain as the danger grows closer with every step. After what feels like hours of running, the family finally slows down. It seems they have lost the man chasing them. For the first time in a long while, there's silence. As they continue their journey across the dry seabed, they begin to see haunting reminders of what once was. Massive sea creatures lying lifeless on the cracked earth, tangled in piles of plastic and debris that once floated deep beneath the waves. But soon, Ben starts to stumble, his pace slowing. Julia kneels beside him and realizes he's burning up. He's dehydrated. She quickly grabs their only water bottle, but her heart sinks when she sees it's almost empty. Cassie then admits, with guilt in her eyes, that she must have left the cap loose. Frustration takes over. Julia lashes out in anger, scolding her for being careless. Cassie breaks down, shouting that it doesn't matter, that they're not going to survive this anyway. The two argue bitterly, their voices echoing across the wasteland, until exhaustion silences them both. After regaining their strength, they press on through the desolate landscape until they stumble upon a crashed airplane, half buried in sand. A sudden rustle makes them freeze, but it's only a flock of birds taking flight. With night falling, they decide to shelter inside the wreckage. Sharing what little food they have left, Julia finds an old photograph tucked in Tom's jacket, a picture of their family before everything went wrong. The sight breaks her heart. Trying to lighten the mood, Cassie quietly asks her mom how she and Tom first met. Julia smiles faintly and begins to tell the story. How her husband once came to the hospital where she worked, and how his charm, his flowers, and a heartfelt poem slowly won her over. Later that night, as everyone sleeps, Cassie steps outside to relieve herself. But before she can react, a figure emerges from the shadows. The same deranged man who's been following them. Just as he's about to grab her, Julia charges out of nowhere, fueled by rage and grief, and tackles him to the ground. Screaming, she stabs him again and again, all her pain and fury pouring out in one desperate act of survival. When it's finally over, Cassie rushes to her mother, wrapping her in a trembling hug to calm her down. Julia breaks down in her daughter's arms as the night grows silent once again. When daylight returns, the lifeless body of the man lies still on the sand, now crawling with tiny fleas. Julia steps closer and notices the skin covered in countless bite marks. It's clear something out here has been feeding on him. Uneasy, the family decides to move on quickly. Moments later, the truth reveals itself. Dozens of crabs crawl out from the man's open mouth, scattering across the dry ground. Hours pass as they continue their journey through the empty wasteland. Julia and Cassie stop to check their map, trying to stay on course, but Ben keeps walking ahead, too thirsty to wait. Before Julia can react, he drops to his knees and plunges his face into a small pond. Panicking, she pulls him back and warns him not to drink. The water could be contaminated. Reluctantly, he steps away, coughing and frustrated. The sun beats down mercilessly, forcing them to cover their heads with scraps of fabric to keep from burning. Ben starts to sway from exhaustion, his steps growing weaker. When they come across a pile of broken furniture, old chairs scattered across the sand, Julia and Cassie use them to build a makeshift shelter. Inside, Julia gives Ben an injection from their medical kit to help stabilize him. They decide to rest there until morning. As the first light creeps in, Julia wakes to a strange clicking sound. At first, she thinks it's the wind, but when she steps outside, her blood runs cold. A massive swarm of crabs is crawling toward them, moving fast. She rushes back inside, shouting for her children to run. The three of them sprint across the open plain until they spot a massive cargo ship stranded in the desert. They rush toward it and see movement. 3 surviving crew members. One woman tries to help, but the 2 men panic and lock themselves inside a shipping container, refusing to open the door. The crabs are almost upon them, so Julia lifts her kids onto the top of the container. She tries to climb up next, but the creatures latch onto her legs, their claws digging into her flesh. Screaming in pain, she kicks and fights as Cassie and Ben grab her arms and pull her up just in time. The crabs swarm below, pouring into the container through a side opening. Gunfire erupts from inside as the crew tries to fight back, but there are too many. One by one, the men are overwhelmed and dragged down. The woman's cries are silenced as the swarm takes her too. Julia, bleeding badly, tears a piece of cloth and wraps it around her injured leg before collapsing in exhaustion. When she wakes again, everything has changed. The air is filled with sand and wind. A massive sandstorm rages around the ship, and she realizes she's alone. Panic sets in as she grabs a weapon from one of the fallen crew and starts searching frantically for her children. Hearing her mother's voice echoing through the storm, Cassie finally runs back. She explains between gasps that she and Ben went to look for help, but there's no one out there, only endless sand and silence. After a long and terrifying search through the storm, Julia and Cassie finally reunite with Ben. He's managed to find an empty cargo container, just sturdy enough to shelter them until the raging sandstorm passes. Inside, Julia braces herself for what she must do. Using Tom's old lighter, she burns the wounds on her leg to stop the bleeding. The pain is unbearable, but she doesn't even scream. Survival leaves no room for weakness. When the storm finally fades, the world outside is eerily calm. The family steps out and starts scavenging nearby containers. To their relief, one of them is filled with water bottles, a rare gift in this dying world. They drink carefully, saving every drop. Searching the wreckage further, they come across the bodies of the crew they'd seen before. Among the debris, Julia finds a radio and a gun. She quickly tries to make contact with their only ally, the man known as. His voice comes through the static, weak and trembling. He tells Julia that he's been attacked by strange creatures, monstrous arthropods from the deep ocean, driven mad by the changing oxygen levels. His message is clear: the ocean isn't gone. It's coming back, and faster than anyone thought. He fires a flare into the sky, marking his location. Julia looks up and sees the faint glow in the distance. With no time to waste, she and her children gather their things and begin walking toward the light, the only hope they have left before the sea returns to claim everything. After hours of trudging through the barren wasteland, the family finally stumbles across a broken container, or rather an abandoned toilet, which gives Ben a quick, if messy, relief. But their eyes are fixed on the horizon. The submarine is finally in sight. There's just one obstacle, a massive, jagged rock formation standing between them and safety. As they begin climbing, the ground trembles violently. Rocks start to tumble, triggering a sudden and massive landslide. Julia reacts instantly, shoving her children out of the path just in time, narrowly avoiding the falling boulders herself. But now, a sheer rock wall blocks the only path forward. Julia tells the kids to keep going without her, but Cassie refuses to leave her behind. A heated argument erupts, voices echoing across the cliffs. Eventually, Julia promises she'll catch up, and reluctantly, Cassie hauls Ben upward. The siblings scale the rest of the rocky terrain and finally reach the submarine, only to find now collapsed outside, bleeding. Weakly, he tells them that he won't make it, urging the kids to take the vessel and survive. Seeing an opportunity for one extra seat, Cassie immediately turns back to find her mother. Meanwhile, Julia notices a swarm of crabs advancing toward her. She opens fire, taking out as many as she can, but the sheer number is overwhelming. Just then, Cassie reaches the top of the wall and offers her hand. With her daughter's help, Julia climbs as fast as her injured leg allows. Together, they reach the other side and sprint toward the submarine. Ben is already on the roof, shooting to keep the crabs distracted. Once inside, Julia continues firing until she runs out of bullets, then throws the empty gun at the creatures before finally joining her children. The family locks the hatch tightly, watching as the swarm gathers outside, clawing at the submarine's windows. Suddenly, the ocean returns. A towering wall of water surges around them. The family straps themselves in and holds hands as the submarine is tossed violently by the waves. Julia's mind races with visions of everything they've endured, while Cassie struggles with nausea. Then, a high-pitched, piercing noise floods the cabin, knocking them unconscious. When they awaken, the storm has passed. Relief washes over them as they realize they survived. Unlocking the hatch, they step outside to discover the submarine has settled in a ruined city. Despite the devastation, hope remains. a chance to rebuild, to survive, and to start again. And that's where Survive comes to a close. Julia, Cassie, and Ben face the unimaginable: storms, deadly creatures, and the complete collapse of the world around them. Yet, through courage, quick thinking, and unbreakable family bonds, they make it to safety. From the horrors of a vanishing ocean to the terrifying pursuit by both man and nature, the film takes us on a relentless journey of survival, fear, and hope. In the end, it's not just about escaping danger, it's about holding on to each other, even when everything else seems lost. If you enjoyed this breakdown of Survive, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a Starz recapped adventure. Until next time, stay curious and stay alive.